So we wanted to start by asking you about mentoring. Mentoring is a really important aspect of any career, but particularly in academia and in research, where even as a graduate student, you might actually be working with an undergrad while you yourself are still learning to be a scientist. We were hoping you could speak a little bit about your experiences both as a mentor and a mentee, also about any specific challenges for mentoring young women versus young men.
So I was really lucky because I didn't think about needing to be mentored. And another scientist who actually graduated from MIT, got her PhD there, also got an MD, but not an MIT, obviously, adopted me early in my career and said, took me under her arm and literally had lots of advice. So that was really fortunate because she was a really savvy person, and she also really understood the business of science. So she always kind of understood that if I'd explain a situation, what the action and the reaction would be, and then would allow me to make my own choices. And I think as a young person, you're really talented at science, but where you're not talented is the wisdom that comes with a work environment or wisdom that comes from operating in the scientific field for a long time. So I was extremely fortunate. And then recently I read a book that a lot of people have been reading called Lean In by Cheryl Sandberg. And in general, I won't go into it, but I didn't like the book very much, but there was a few things in that book that I thought were really valuable. And she was talking to some young girl that was working within Google. I think it was within Google. And are you being mentored okay? Are you your career moving along? She said, oh, yes, it's fabulous. My mentor talks to me about an hour a week. I wish I had more time. And her response was something like, that's not mentoring, that's a psychiatrist. So I also think that if you have a good mentor, you should think about using that person not as a psychiatrist, but like even for short vignettes of what would you do? Who would you go to? Should I move this up the ladder? Or just forget it, move on, don't waste your time. So that's important. Women are easier to mentor than men. I mean, the old joke about men not wanting to ask for instructions applies to women. And I always try to tell women that it's probably harder as a career, especially when you have family and you have kids. But there's a real advantage of having a PhD versus an MD. So I have a PhD and an MD. And I've always looked back, and nobody ever told me this, but everybody always says, oh, well, how many weeks did you get off when you had a baby? Mm-hmm. And that's not the picture. It's the 18-year picture, okay? It's not the 2-week picture. I hate to tell you, the baby doesn't disappear for the next 18 years. And the thing about being a PhD is your kid will get sick. There will be parent-teacher conferences in the middle of the day that you can't believe they schedule in the middle of the day. And you are a working woman, so you're going to have to take time off. But that's the beauty of running a lab. You can take 2 hours off during the day. It doesn't mean you're not going to work those 2 hours on the weekend or at night, but you can take those 2 hours off. And if you're just a pure MD, you may have gotten more time off when you had the baby because somebody else could cover for you. But the real advantage is the next 18 years. And I think people forget about that because it's not how many weeks you get off after pregnancy. That's just the beginning. So all those things were pretty important for me. Some of them I learned. Some of them I had this fabulous mentor.